Hey guys, today I'm going to be reviewing The Green Knight. This film was directed by David Lowery. Lowery is one of those directors that I struggle with, but I also, kind of admire. He certainly captures a mood with his films, and he's often using two opposing styles and bringing them together in a very subversive way. I think of a movie like Ghost Story, which maybe you'd think of as being like haunted, paranormal, horror elements, but it turned out to be something that was much more kind of wistful and melancholy. Very surreal. It's often combining the soft and the macabre to explore themes of loss, mortality, and how that exists in time and space. Many similarities between that film and a film like The Green Knight, and I love that he has graduated more into, more ambitious films, and especially a film like this, which is going to be more accessible, commercially. But he never conforms to that commercialism. He remains very true to himself, which I do admire, and he really commits to this very slow, hypnotic dreaminess. He's embracing both the subtle and the dramatic, and I think that's what appealed to me the most. And he plunges into like a very Tarkovsky-esque sort of atmosphere. I was very compelled by the film at times, and I would say even riveted at times, and I feel like it's more maybe full-bodied, more fully rounded compared to a movie like Ghost Story, which felt a little bit skeletal, though I do struggle with The Green Knight as well. Part of my issue with Lowery is even though he is attempting to explore maybe more abstract aspects of the of someone's personal journey, of the human psyche, it often leads to a bit of a thinness, a lot like Ghost Story, and an ambiguity that can compel you forward in some ways, but can also leave you unsatisfied, wanting more. So oftentimes I found myself really liking a certain thing about this film, but almost always, it has its drawbacks at the same time. Mood can be a fantastic thing. It can be a really wonderful thing to capture, but I think also, especially in this modern day, we rely a little bit too heavily on that sort of thing. I'd like to see more breadth of ideas and depth of characters, especially the situations, just to be expanded upon a little bit, but overall, as a film, it surprised me. I will start more with the positives that I see here. Overall, just as an experience, it is really refreshing to see a movie like this, just because, we see a lot of fantasies. We've seen fantasy epics here and there in Hollywood, within the past 20 years, but this one is a more ambitious, again, more subversive version of a more fantasy epic tale, stripping back the narrative so we can look more at the psychological, abstract aspects of the mind and how that can be brought forward to the forefront. It's more of that existential, surrealist exploration of one's personal odyssey, as I've said. And when it comes to the look of the film and how they explore that, there's a lot of, gaping spaces, a lot of wideness, and the surfaces have a very earthy, very tactile quality. You really soak in the atmosphere and everything, all of like the textures and everything. It almost feels like it contributes to part of that self-exploration. Very ambiguous, very open to interpretation, often enough. And, there are some really great shots in the film. One of my favorite shots, or one that I think maybe it's one of the first ones that really stuck with me as I was watching the film, is when our main character is leaving his homeland and, he's just kind of going on a road, and that very literal representation of, your hero accepting his call to adventure. I love the resonance of that journey sinking in for our main character. And obviously this is a unique journey, and it's from somebody who is purposely inexperienced and privileged and lacking in the ability to face bravery, face the ego, unable to let go of a lot of those comforts, a lot of those luxuries that he knows, those conveniences. And you see it will take time to get there. For me, the film started to really hone in on a very hypnotic tone around the time where he's going into the Test Allies and Enemies period, and he is first captured by the thieves in the woods. And there's a real strange pacing to it. There is a break in the consistency, and yet I found myself very drawn to it. It was the first time, and one of the only times really, where I found myself really on the edge, really one with the experience and wondering, where is this going to take me? And there is a shot there that is maybe one of my favorite, maybe my favorite shot in the entire film, is that long shot where you see, our main character tied up against the tree, and it goes around, and then you see his remains, his skeleton. And for me, that expresses so many of the themes of the film very well. And again, all in one shot, no words, and it's expressing themes of time and the different paths that we can take in life in a very unexpected way. And the film here is really starting to branch out and explore some more versatile paths. And for me, that particular shot is even more effective at expressing this particular idea of time and mortality. I think, better than the ending does. And I really like the ending. It's a beautiful shot, though the logic behind it is a little bit faulty and a little bit silly. It's like you have these thieves and they tie up our hero and then they run away, but yet they leave his sword like 10 feet away. It makes no sense as to why there would even be a shot like that at all when you think about it, because it's like, the sword's right there. So unfortunately, the idea behind the shot really falls apart for me. And I get that internal logic, especially when it's meant to be very abstract and everything, can be quite slippery here, but oh God, suspension of disbelief can only take you so far. Even in a fantasy, whether the situation is logical or not, we need to have a sense of we can buy into it at least. But in some ways, that shot kind of represents the overarching issue I have with it. You know, it is very interesting, it's haunting, it's well done, and it gives me this unsettling feeling of floating above some sort of abyss in an eerie way. It can be bold and freeing for the viewer, and again, logically, it kind of falls apart. And for me, the first act especially was a bit of a struggle here. Yes, the film is very spellbinding and very atmospheric at times, but atmosphere, again, I think needs to be, you need to fill in those spaces with some more complex pathos and just more thematic depth, because there is that lack of balance that I constantly feel when it comes to that emotional cohesion. And if it had been more balanced, I felt like it truly could have ignited in a way that completely won me over emotionally. But instead, it's kind of intentionally, lightly sketching out more of the archetypal elements, and that just leads naturally, I think, to a bit of aimlessness. And for me, Lowry, just as a creator, is often struggling with that structural consistency and the ability to tie in a lot of the symbolism with the narrative elements in a way that feels meaty, that I can sink my teeth into. And obviously, he's a real talent, and he has a very creative eye. And yet, one thing that really bothers me as well is that it's a little bit too consciously arty for my taste. And I feel like we run into this problem a lot nowadays. It's like filmmakers are using a lot of imagery that we might have seen in a Tarkovsky film or a Kubrick film, and thinking that by doing so, it's somehow going to elevate the film into that sort of status. But no, it doesn't. And when you use shots like that, and I'm not saying you shouldn't use them, they're beautiful, of course, but I think there just needs to be more to it. I think often filmmakers use it as an excuse to get away with lazy storytelling or lack of cinematic direction. Don't just use it for aesthetic reasons, for the smoke and mirrors. That is an insult, I think, to those great artists, and even when it appears cleverly implemented on the surface. And I worry about that when it comes to A24 and its success. And this is not something people talk about a lot. I love A24. I think they're fantastic. They've made some great films, and I think it's wonderful that we have this independent company that is able to bring all of these more art house psychological films to the forefront. But at the same time, I worry that, when you get successful based on something like that, and in this case, it is more that art house thriller, psychological type of stuff, you run into the trap of becoming a brand other than that being another aspect of the artistic integrity. And I think it's just kind of pretentious and easy to, write something off as a masterpiece just because it had a shot that reminded you of Stalker. And I don't believe that The Green Knight is a signaling into that dissent or anything, because like I said, I like the film and I think it's a positive sort of spin on a fantasy film. But at the same time, it's a little bit hollow, and it's testing those waters a little too often for my taste. Because ultimately, whether you want to go more artsy or you want to go more traditional fantasy, this is ultimately an allegory, and therefore it does depend on the hero's journey. Literally, the hero's journey depends on that emotional arc. But the allegory aspects of things never felt fully cohesive, never fully intact. It wasn't grounded in anything concrete, especially as far as our main character is concerned, especially in the first act. The exposition is a struggle. I never got a good sense of this character and who he is and why he would make certain decisions, because the decisions that he makes here are very baffling. So I think it would serve us well to know kind of why he is that kind of person. If you could include more of a sense of intention and more emotion throughout, I think it would make those choices at the beginning resonate so much stronger in that final act. One of the main issues with this movie is one of the most crucial points of it, and it is that call to adventure. Literally the scene where he is given his objective, the game that he must complete. And yeah, his choices here they make absolutely no sense. Land a blow to your opponent and you will receive the same, 1 year later. It's like, okay. It makes sense to kind of just nick your opponent and then he'll nick you right back. You have all of these knights with all this experience, all these legends, and they're like, nah, let that kid do it. And it's like, what? And this could be a situation where the main character is really that ignorant, really that stupid? But, ugh, you know, again, like internal logic needs to be bought into a little bit. We need a little bit of an explanation or build towards that point. Or if it's the case of, I'm just going to behead my opponent so that way if he's dead, I won't have to worry about it a year from now. Okay, well then he's kind of an asshole. But I don't get the sense that he's an asshole before that. And I say, go ahead, make him a spoiled asshole, make him an idiot, you know, go for it. It could be kind of interesting. Go the Barry Lyndon route and have just a very unlikable protagonist at the center. But if you do look at Barry Lyndon, that is also a film that is very quiet, relies much more on the atmosphere and ambiguity for its power, and yet you know the characters, you understand them. They don't have to say a word, and yet you know who they are. And I feel like a film like The Green Knight could learn a thing or two from a film like that. I just think that had they handled our main character in The Green Knight here like that, think about how bone-chilling that ending would be. Think about the impact of that ego death. And even in the Test Allies and Enemies period, you know, there's a lot of these little vignettes, these little dilemmas. Obviously, our main character is faced with all kinds of different choices leading up to that final act. And I love the idea behind those vignettes because, you know, they give you little clues here and there, but they're not necessarily fully tied in a literal sense to our main story. The one where he's trying to find the girl's head in the water. I loved the kind of bizarre quality of it. It reminded me of something like Over the Garden Wall, the animated show. Kind of grotesque, macabre, but has a sense of humor to it. But I think even that could have done with a bit more creativity in The Green Knight, a bit more visual representation. Just giving it a little more traction, a little more texture for it to resonate. I think with the budget they were given, they did wonders. It's really, a lot of it is spectacular. I do think that Lowry's maybe biting off a little more than he can chew. I really want to see a director's cut of this. I know the movie's like a little over 2 hours, I think. I think it should be closer to 3, just because I think that there's a lot here that I'm missing. There are a lot of holes that I think need to be filled in. Because all the things I'm asking for, they might exist. There might be a lot of footage that just never made it to the theatrical cut. And I think a lot of that would give us more grit, more emotion, and more struggle with that moral center. And most importantly, I think it will be more narratively convincing. So if all those things had happened, you got me, man. I am on a silver platter for you. I love this idea. I love that there are people out there who still want to make interesting films with real scope, real ambition. It still exists. It's just very hard for that to exist in today's world, but props to those who go for it. Even though this one has a lot of unevenness to it, it's so intriguing and it gives me hope that we can really, you know, expand on this and build on this. This is the closest I've come to really feeling that sense of atmosphere, I think, in a long time. And yeah, I think it's just something different and exciting, and it's enjoyable. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that's something you're interested in, you can always go to the website, to the shop. And if you have any questions about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below. Also, I will give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. As always, thank you guys so much for your support. If you'd like to become a patron, the link to support that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.